If you were president, would you work to phase out the IRS?
Immediately.
A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me...
And you can only do that if you change our ideas about what the role of government ought to be. If you think the government has to take care of us from cradle to grave, and if you think our government should police the world and spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a foreign policy that we cannot manage, you can't get rid of the IRS. But if you want to lower taxes, and if you want the government to quit printing the money to come up with the shortfall and cause all the inflation, you have to change policy.
Music died. So bye bye.
Well, in my first week, I already got rid of the income tax. So my second week, I would get rid of the inflation tax. It's a tax that nobody talks about. We live way beyond our means with a foreign policy we can't afford and an entitlement system that we have encouraged. We print money for it, the value of the money goes down, and poor people pay higher prices. That is a tax. It's a transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to Wall Street. Wall Street's doing quite well, but the inflation tax is eating away at the middle class of this country. We need to get rid of the inflation tax with sound money.
How do you believe in rock and roll? Can music save your mortal soul? And can you teach me how to dance real slow?
There's nothing radical about it. To me, the radical idea is overspending, over-borrowing, and then resorting to printing money when you run out of it, and you wonder why you have financial problems, or borrowing it from the Chinese to finance our military operation. I mean, most Americans are waking up to this.
Only teenage bronc and buck with a pink carnation and a pickup truck, but I knew I was out of luck the day the music died. I started singing bye bye Miss American Pie, drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye and singing, this'll be the day that I die.
I think you are the only Republican running for president right now who actually voted against the war in Iraq at the very outset. Are you going to bring that up on the stage tonight?
Well, if I have the chance, I certainly will, because 70% of the American people now think that the foreign policy is going in the wrong direction and want to change.
And the jester sang for the king and queen in a coat he borrowed from James Dean, and a voice that came from you and me.
Congressman Paul, you voted against the war. Why are all your fellow Republicans up here wrong?
That's a very good question, and you might ask the question, why are 70% of the American people now wanting us out of there, and why did the Republicans do so poorly last year? So I would suggest that we should look at foreign policy. I'm suggesting very strongly that we should have a foreign policy of non-intervention.
In the park, and we sang dirges in the dark the day the music died. We were singing bye bye Miss American Pie, drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye and singing, this'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day.
Conservatives does not have to be embarrassed about being opposed to needless war that is undeclared. Here we're going to war. Ever since World War II, we never declared war. We've never won a war. There's nothing conservative about that. And that we should mind our own business and take the advice of the founders, and that is stay out of entangling alliances, don't get involved in nation building, and don't get involved in the internal affairs of other nations. A lot more Americans would be alive if we followed that policy. We don't need any more money to bring the troops home. I mean, we already have $600 or $700 billion in the pipeline, so there's a more than adequate funds available to take care of our troops and make sure they're out of harm's way and bring them home. So we don't need that funding. What we need is more funding for our veterans. We neglect our veterans, we neglect our hospitals. At the same time, we're over there spending even more money to perpetuate a war, and the Democrats have not offered an alternative. So I think the Republican alternative ought to be that we ought to mind our own business. President Bush ran on this program of not policing the world and not getting involved in the internal affairs of other nations. Stay out of nation building. I think it's a great policy.
So you just want all the troops to come home. That's what you would do right now if you were president.
Well, you can't do it in 24 hours, but you should design a policy of non-intervention. And why do we have troops in Korea for more than 50 years? And why do we occupy Europe? I mean, we're going broke. And we don't need this. We need this money to be spent at home. We need to worry about our borders here at home, not worry about the borders around the world, the borders between Syria and Iraq. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with our national security. We ought to deal with our own national security. Our military right now is in shambles. It's a mess because we've been stretched too thin. So one of these days we're going to have to wake up, and I'm afraid we won't wake up until we go bankrupt, and we're approaching that time already.
He was singing bye bye Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day that I die. I met a girl who sang the blues, and I asked her for some happy news, but she just smiled and turned away. I went down to the sacred store where I'd heard the music years before, but the man there said the music wouldn't play. And in the streets the children screamed, the lovers cried and the poets dreamed, but not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken. And the three men I admire most, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, they caught the last train for the coast the day the music died. And they were singing, bye bye Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day that I die. They were singing, bye bye Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this'll be the day